He said, I think there's a church in you. I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, you need to go plant a church to reach the poor. He said, I hear that in your language. Go back to Baton Rouge and plant a church to reach the poor. It takes a lifetime. And we're not building, we're not setting up prefab walls. We're laying brick by brick. Every Sunday is a brick. Every meeting, every moment.
I think content is great, but like it's not just what's being said, who's saying it. That matters to me at this point. It's like, what's the spirit on this? What's been your experience with this principle you're teaching me?
And he said these words. He said, I'm a self-made man. And you know what I thought? I'm sorry. I feel sorry for you. I'm so sorry you're a self-made man. Because reality is you're not.
Hey, it's Rich, and you're listening to the Mature Me podcast, weekly content devoted to all things life, leadership, culture, and faith. Thank you for taking some time to tune in. Make sure you subscribe and follow us on all our social channels so you don't miss a thing. Let's listen to today's episode. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to a brand new, fresh Mature Me podcast. My name is Rich Wilkerson Jr. I'm so grateful that you're tuning in today. If you're listening by way of audio, if you're on Spotify or Apple, go ahead, leave us a review, share this content on YouTube. What's up, YouTube people? Like, subscribe, share it, leave us a comment, questions around leadership, questions around marriage, relationships, any area of your life. We want to try to help speak into it as we bring great guests here talking about who you're becoming, maturing in the Lord. Listen, so many great things are coming up in the life of the Mature Me world. VooCon, I know it's a little ways away, but there at the end of June, it is our big, huge, really family reunion as we bring people from all over the world, pastors, leaders, churches, as they come to encounter the Lord, as they come to be equipped, and lastly, as they leave empowered. We want you to be at VooCon 2025, dying to be different. There's all of my commercials. Today, we have an incredible guest, someone who I've known for decades of my life, a hero in the faith for me. I've got more fun stories than I could ever tell on this podcast. He's a pastor, preacher of the gospel, husband of one wife, ladies and gentlemen, a father of three, and now even a grandfather. He is the leader of ARC, which is an amazing, amazing network of churches that are in relationship all over the world, planting churches by the thousands. We love this great man of God. Welcome to the Mature Me podcast. Here it comes. Dino Rizzo.
Let's go.
It's about time we got you over here, Uncle Dino.
I'm telling you. I couldn't wait to get here. And I love this. I love this space.
You like the setting?
Yeah, I like it.
The team is maybe saying that maybe we should, move here permanently. But
I like it. Feels good.
I like recording.
A lot of cool stuff happening here.
I like recording in the Heart of Design District, but this is a vibe in here.
It is. It's great.
This is the lounge. This is where we host a lot of great meetings and a lot of great meals and a lot of great hangout. You are known as the Godfather. Do you know that? Do you let people in the church call you the Godfather?
I did not know that.
How do you feel about that?
It's always up and down. You got good thoughts. No, I'm grateful. I love the church. I love the body of Christ. I love what God's doing around the world and through all different kind of vibes and flows and makes and models. I just love it all. I love the church. So I'm not the church critic. I'm kind of the cheerleader of the church.
You're the church godfather.
I just love it, and grateful to see what God's doing. And
so many young pastors look to you. You are a constant encourager. You're inspiring. You make ministry fun. I want to talk about all of these things. Really quick, for those that are just listening and tuning in that might not be familiar, tell us what ARC is, and then we'll kind of use that as an established, so it kind of just says, this is who Dino is and what he's up to. But what is ARC?
Well, we plant churches. I mean, it's really, we have a mission. I mean, we enjoy the fellowship, we enjoy the networking, we enjoy connecting, all those things. But there are great, there are great groups that do that. I mean, what you guys do, what a lot of our friends do, connecting pastors, doing life together. We do that, but we have a purpose, which is starting new churches. And so that's been the goal for 23 years. Just a few of us got together 23 years ago and knew how hard it was to start a new church. Didn't have a lot of fans or a lot of finances or a lot of training. So we got together, myself, Billy Hornsby, which is Pastor Chris's late father-in-law, Chris Hodges, and then Greg Surratt built a great church there. Now his son leads that church. And we got together with me, Greg, Billy Hornsman said, let's launch new churches and let's not make it as hard as what we all went through. Because my wife and I planted a church in 92, and you just didn't know anybody who started a new church. And so we said, let's help. And so the first 2 churches we launched were Church of the Highlands in Birmingham.
That one hasn't gone very good.
That one's, it's been a little work, just a little work.
Still got a little potential.
Yeah, just trying to get it off the ground. And then New Life in Arkansas, the BZ. BZ.
Same thing.
And same thing. Still trying to figure it out.
But we're grateful.
And those 2 worked.
Yep.
And we said, what about if we took this model and did it some more? And so this past fall, we launched our 1,131st church. And so it's been neat. We've learned a lot, still learning a lot. Our model is to launch large, trying to get them to the best state possible. We want to launch all kinds of churches that come from different flows as it relates to their background. They come to us. And so we train them, resource them, work with them, get them healthy as best we can, and start them new. And so we do that. It's based out of Birmingham because I get to serve at Church of the Highlands too, church that you love. And so I love doing both of that. And then on the side, I do some outreach and some serve. So if you cut me, I still bleed outreach and still bleed serve.
Well, we're going to talk a lot about the Ark, and I've got a lot of things that I want to ask you about in relation to planting churches. But even kind of before we get there, talk just a little bit about how you even got here. I just like your background. I like your story, growing up, being around, working with some incredible men of God. And I've got some questions. We're going to get you telling some stories. But just even how you got into the ministry, because you're not new to this. I mean, you've been planting churches now for 22 years, but you planted your own church. Yeah. You served with some great men of God. Just even sort of your salvation story, your call to ministry. Just take us backwards a little bit.
Well, I turned 60 this summer, which I love it. My son got married on the day I turned 60, so I got a new daughter-in-law. Got a granddaughter this year. Got another grandchild on the way. So it's been a good year. So it's been a year where I've been we've reflected Dylan and I. Yeah. I'm married to a Louisiana girl, and we've been married 36 years. Ditto, of course. And
we know what to export from there.
Exactly.
Not a lot.
Yeah. And she, so it's been I've done some reflect. When I turned 50, I blew by it. Just knocked it upside the head. Wasn't even worried about it. Just slapped age 50. When I turned 60, it's like for the first time in my life, I reflected. And I started thinking about, life, purpose, legacy. Yeah. And it has made me look back, and I'm just so grateful for great relationships. I was not raised in church. I was raised in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Come on. I tell people, shout out to Dirty Myrtle. If you know it, you know it. And so I came to Christ through a church that did a outreach. Okay. Literally, a church just was doing things on the inside, but said, what would it look like if we left the church and go out into the streets? And they were kind, and they were doing some cool stuff that I'd never seen. I'd seen the bullhorns and some other things, but they did an outreach. One of those serve people came over and had a conversation with me, impacted my heart. And at 18 years old, I gave my life to Christ. 2 weeks later, by myself in my room, and I read a little sheet of paper that a church had given out, and read the prayer on the back of that sheet of paper and gave my life to Christ. So sometimes you wonder when we do outreach. I know you do a bunch of that here. Love how you do Serve Day and all that you do at Christmas. And you wonder, does anybody ever get saved? Does anybody ever get impacted? And yeah, they do. I'm here right now because the church did an outreach and had a heart for others that were not yet here. And then I went to Bible school where I met your dad. A massive impact that your dad, he came and did a spiritual emphasis week. Your father-in-law, Denny, did a spiritual emphasis week. They were partnered up with Glenn Berto. Yeah. And so I was at Jimmy Swaggart Bible College.
My God.
Oh, my God.
People don't even know what we're talking about.
No.
How did you go to Jimmy Swaggart? Because he was just you got saved. You're like,
I was going to either go to Rhema or like Christ for the Nations. Yep. I couldn't get in ORU. There was no way. I'd only been a Christian like 6 months. They were doing like Christian DNA tests. So I'd have never made that smell test, man.
You didn't own a tie.
I was still working through some things. I was saved, but I wasn't real sanctified. I hadn't gotten there yet.
What was Pastor Jimmy's Bible college
he was
called?
evangelistic. Yeah. He wanted to, so I got saved and started doing street ministry. Started working with the homeless. Started working with, those that are fighting addiction.
Highways and byways.
That was the way that I came to Christ that way. So I thought that's what everybody did. Got in a little involved with a little beach church and did outreach. And I went to my mother and said, I need to know the Bible. I'm out here talking to people about God and I don't know the Bible. The lost know more scripture than me. Literally, I'm getting debated by people around me that are heathens and they know the scripture. I don't know the Bible. And she said, you need to go somewhere for a year, learn the Bible. So like I came in one night late, man. My mother stayed up late, man. She was a night out. I came in from working. I had a beach job about 3:30 in the morning. And she said, I just watched Jimmy Swaggart. He's opening a Bible college. I ordered you an application. I filled out the application, got a phone call and from one of the admissions people. And they interviewed me on the phone. They said, we have one spot left. This is true. One spot left. We have 200 applications, but your name keeps coming up. And then a week later, they called my dad. And my dad, who did not want me to go to Bible college, you want me to run his beach shop, said, you would be, you ought to have him there for a year. I went for 1 year, met Glenn Berto, met Rich Wilkerson, Sr., met Denny Duran.
My father-in-law.
Yeah, and they all made an impact on my life. And I got involved with youth ministry.
What year was this roughly?
Oh, man, it's a long time ago. This is 80, 84, 84, 85.
Now, I don't know all the demographics of who listens to this podcast, but
a lot of people would know those names.
But just try to give someone some context who's never heard the name Jimmy Swaggart, who's still in ministry this day. Who is Jimmy Swaggart at that time?
Biggest thing going at that time. I mean, he was going all over the world preaching, giving out Bibles, doing missions on TV, doing music, had a big old church. And, and at that time, it was happening. It was a season where it was happening. It's never good when people make bad decisions and have all those things going on in their life. But during that time, it was another world. We always look back at another time and think, boy, they really messed it up. But in the moment, it was pretty cool.
No, I think it was like
a lot of our friends were impacted by that.
The most impactful, prolific preacher of his day.
100%.
God blessing it. I mean, reaching.
Trailblazer.
Yeah. Pioneer. So you pack a bag, you head on down to Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Didn't know anything about Louisiana.
Never dreaming that Baton Rouge was going to play such a big part of your story. You go to Bible college, you hear these other young guys preaching. What does that sort of give you some reference of what's possible, how you could fit in or no?
No, I wanted to do street ministry.
Okay, street ministry.
I jumped in bus ministry. I jumped in homeless ministry. I jumped in campus ministry. I started going to some of the broken schools in our community, doing little Bible studies, these forgotten schools. I just never saw myself in a church setting. I never saw myself pastoring. Or, I had a speech issue growing up. So, when I would preach, it would be real fast. I wouldn't finish my words. Only people wanted to hear it was like down at the homeless shelter or the nursing home. I mean, I never saw myself standing in opportunities I'm sure you feel the same way. Opportunities that we get now that I'm 60 years old and I still can't believe some of the places you get to go and communicate the gospel. Very thankful and very humbled by that. And I just was doing that. And Glenn Berto grabbed me and said, hey, help me build this youth group. And your dad would come around. I just jumped in there and did bus ministry and fellowship group. I did everything I could and just worked hard. Just any extra moment I had, I wanted to just, help people. I felt like God called me to help people. I don't remember I want to be a pastor.
Yeah.
I want to be an evangelist. I want to be a worship. No, I felt like God said, I want you to help broken humanity. That was the call on my life. Later on, I felt called. I still feel called to preach. I felt called to communicate that later on. And even at that point, I thought, well, I'll do that in a mission setting. I'll do that in an outreach. I'll do that like Dave Wilkerson.
Yeah.
I'll do that like Bill Wilson. I'll do that like Matthew Barnett, Tommy Barnett. That was what I thought I would do. And that culture was creating that heart of evangelists, of missions. It's a very missions-rich culture.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful for those years. And your dad played a big part in the next step when I left Bible college. And every time I talk to him, I thank him for that.
That's so cool.
So we're We're sort of family.
We are family.
Yeah.
I've got my own personal story that I'll tell you in a moment that's wrapped up with you involved in it. But you're at Jimmy Swaggart's Bible College, and Glenn Berteau, maybe some people who are listening don't know that name, but Glenn Berteau is a great pastor.
Yes.
I mean, from my vantage point, always being a young man, getting to hear him preach, he was so dynamic and so powerful. But it's interesting that, I mean, he is on the staff of Jimmy Swaggart.
Yeah, building a massive youth group.
Who's the biggest preacher of his time. Glenn's there. He builds this massive youth ministry.
Yeah.
You're there driving buses for Glenn.
Doing everything.
Was Glenn like, as a young man, and by the way, here's the other part of the story. My father-in-law, Denny Duran, led Glenn Berteau to Jesus, which is just all so.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm even taking time to explain this to people that are listening is because the kingdom of God advances forward through relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of what takes place is through relational equity, and God builds trust with men of God and women of God. So I just love seeing all the areas that were tied together. But like Glenn, he was powerful preacher. He ends up leaving to go plant his own church. Don't you take over that youth ministry?
Yeah. Well, to give you even more backstory, so your father-in-law was a great athlete.
Yep.
My father-in-law was a great athlete. My father-in-law played with Pistol Pete at LSU.
Oh my goodness.
So Wayne Austin.
Pete Maravich.
Yeah, Pete Maravich, Wayne Austin. So your father-in-law and my father-in-law knew each other through sports. And then they both became youth pastors and youth evangelists in that Louisiana world. So it goes way back with the Durans, the Wilkerson, the Rizzos, the Bertos. We could mention other names, but
the Swaggarts,
the Swaggarts,
the Jerry Lee Lewis,
Mickey Gilly.
Yeah, we just start naming
all these. Throw these names out. Dwight Yoakam. Let's just throw some names out on there. You know,
I flew on a flight one time with Dwight Yoakam.
Yeah, there we go.
True story.
You know, all these. You know, it's everybody.
Yeah.
But you know, I was there. Glenn left. There's some things went down. It was not a good scene. It was painful. And we had 1,500 kids in our youth group. God. And because of the situation, Glenn leaves to start his church. They passed me the youth group. I'm the only guy left standing. There's 100 leaders. 4 of us stay. I'm the only one that had ever graced the stage. And a few announcements, a few prayer times Glenn had me up. And so they passed me the youth group. Dylan and I were getting ready to get married. And so the first night I led the youth group, 1,200 kids. 6 weeks later, it was 90 kids. I rode that thing from 1,200 to 90. You know, they don't do any magazine articles when you take something from 1,200 to 90.
1,200
to 90 in the same room.
90.
It was a train wreck. And those 90 didn't want to be there with me.
Yeah.
It was horrible. And I that's how I got my start. And so Dylan and I get married, and I called your dad during that time. And I didn't know what to do. I just said, so somehow I got your, no cell phones. It's like smoke signals. It's like Morse code.
Yeah.
And I think your dad was still maybe in Washington.
Yeah.
This would have been 87, 88.
Yeah, we were in Washington at that point.
Okay, so you were
I was born in 84.
Yeah.
So dad was, we were out of Washington. He would have been, I think, traveling at that point.
And so I find a number, and then I make a call. I get your dad on the phone. I don't know how he called me back. And I said, I'm thinking about either leaving or staying. The youth group's going from 1,200 to 90. I don't know what to do. And everybody's telling me it's a horrible idea to stay here. And I'll never forget, he said, well, what has God said to you? What has he said to you? And I said, I feel like I'm supposed to shepherd and tend to these kids. He said, I think that's what you should do. Don't listen to anybody else. Be obedient to those kids and watch what happens. So I said, well, I don't know if I'm in the will of the Lord. I like God's will. God, everybody talks about, is it God's will? Is it God's will? And he was the first one who kind of introduced this thought, well, what's in your heart? Just follow what's in your heart. God will figure it all out. It's almost like I was so binging over, is this the will of the Lord? And he's like, but the opportunity in front of you right now, there's 90 kids who need you. Serve them and see what happens. And quiet all the noise from everything else.
Very good.
And so Dylan and I got off the phone and told Dylan, I said, I'm doing it. I'm staying here. And we put our head down, and we were there for 4 more years. And we built that youth group back to 400 or 500, which you got to think in those days, that was a significant
in those days, how about right now? Vu Hai. Are our youth pastors listening right now? This is in the 80s. It's still so significant. What we're talking about is always something, very, very sensitive, but it was such national, international news.
Yeah.
Those that don't know the story, but Jimmy Swaggart, this prolific preacher of his time, there was a moral failure. Yep. It was all over national media. And I was way too young to know about this. And I never I didn't know who Jimmy Swaggart was. But for my dad, when I hear my dad tell this story, I remember this day vividly for one reason. My dad used to talk about how much Jimmy Swaggart had such an impact on his life. And he used to write for his newsletter and get to preach at some things. And such an honor for him. My dad always had this handlebar mustache when I was growing up.
I remember it. And a little bit of a fro.
Yep, a little bit of a fro. It was a perm. He was perming that thing, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I just remember it had some action.
We got to put up the picture real quick of my dad.
Yeah,
there it is.
There was some action.
How about that? They'll do that in post. But I came in from playing outside. I don't know how old I would have been. You could tell the date. But I was young. But when I walked in the house, I looked at my dad. I'm like, who is this man? He had shaved his mustache off. And I almost didn't recognize him. I'm like, hey. It wasn't until I was much older that I heard my dad tell the story that when Jimmy Swaggart had this moral failure and had to make this public apology, and you guys would have had the youth
we were
group
there.
scatter, and you would have been there for that. My dad went into such a season of grieving that he went into like his prayer closet for 2 or 3 days, just before God, fear and trembling, repenting, just going, God, I want to make sure I'm serving you and only you. And one of the things that the Lord, he felt like spoke to him to do was when he came out of that prayer closet was shave off your mustache as a sign of stepping into almost like a rebirth. So the day he came out of that,
Nazarene.
something of that nature where it was just going, this is a physical thing I'm doing to say that I've, through this whole process, that I myself have been humbled. And I just remember as a kid going, oh, now I know the timeline, because I remember when I walked in and my dad had no mustache. And I don't know, I think that it's an interesting thing about how we learn in life. You know, wisdom, some people learn from experience, but wisdom would say I can learn from your experience. Yeah. And I think if I take anything from my dad there, which is going, it wasn't that he was being arrogant. It was more saying, here's someone that I've emulated. There's someone that I've modeled after, but man is man. And my trust and my faith is not in a man. Men fail. Our feet are made of clay. I got to put my trust into Jesus. And so it wasn't a denial of Jimmy Swaggart. It was more about me making sure my loyalty and my allegiance is to King Jesus. Yeah. And so I think he came out just saying, I want to make sure that my focus is in the right place moving forward.
I think that's the decision you always want to make. I mean, I think everybody can be a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
There are bad decisions that we all make. And you want to we don't want to make those bad decisions. It's when we do, we repent. We get our life. We just get things right with God. But you know, if I can learn something, and if I can gain something out of what you've walked through, then now you can be a cautionary tale to me to say, don't treat people that way.
Very good.
Don't act that way. Don't put your focus on that. Don't make that decision. Learn from my mistake. Learn from my failure. And you know, I think in all those cases, what your dad was doing, I know I've made bad decisions. I've watched people make bad decisions. You know, we're human. The other day, somebody called me. I thought it was interesting. And we were talking. He said something about, man, there's such a preacher problem. And I said, well, I think there's a human problem.
Good.
There's a humanity problem. And it started in the garden. And we just make bad choices. And you hate all those moments, and it's tragic and it's terrible. But, you know, humans make bad decisions. And then there's the consequences and the fallout of all those things. But at the end of it all, you want to learn something, and you want to make a vow to say, I want to love my wife. I want to love my kids. I want to love the word. I don't want to forget about prayer. I want to recapture my devotional. I want to care about people. I want to be humble. I want to listen. I don't want to be hard-headed. So for me, when you have a front row seat on pain, you want to be able to extract something from it that says, okay, I want to start a new chapter that could be more like Christ. So that's what your dad was saying. I think that's what we all do. And we all do that in our own life when we have our own tsunamis.
Of course. You say that when you were younger that, you know, maybe you had a speech impediment of some sort, that you didn't finish your words. You take over this youth ministry and you have to start preaching. Did you ever preach a sermon in front of Brother Swaggart?
Well, I'll tell you what's funny is he would walk in every once in a while.
Give me something.
I mean, I was juggling. I was doing anything to make these kids. I was chasing puppies. I was doing anything. I was doing all these illustrated sermons.
Bring your friends. I'm going to wrestle a bear.
Anything, man. Bringing a dog on stage, you know, which is always a bad idea when you bring pets involved. You know, and just, you know, you're doing your best to try to communicate to kids and help them know God. And so once he came over, we had a little youth conference. It's kind of cool. It was me, another guy. We had about 1,000 kids there. I was like, man, this is happening, youth conference. He happened to walk in. And so 2 weeks later, And I was 25 years old. I was a baby in those days of preaching. You never got the main stage. You never got big church. And one of his people called me and said, "Hey, Brother Sweat, would you preach on Sunday night?" I was like, "Where?" Like preach on like Sunday night service.
Like at our church?
You're like, we're like a mission church. I mean, and I'll never forget. I didn't have any good clothes, so my mother-in-law, Delenn's mom, Miss D, took me to Steinmark's, man, rocking that Steinmark's, man. Got that $99 suit, man.
Let's go.
I was operating in that olive green double-breasted. It was, I mean, bring it back. I wish I had that thing. It was strong. It was a strong look. And I preached that Sunday night, and he's sitting there. A lot of your heroes are there. And you know those moments where you just, God helps you, and you get done, and you're like, wow, God helped me that night. And it went fairly well, and it went decent.
Let's go.
And afterwards, he called, the only call I ever got, he called me the next day and said, you did well. I'll never forget. He said, you handled yourself well in the pulpit, and you honored God. And that, I mean, for someone like that, or anybody in our life to say something like that. And I've always learned that, I learned that day. I was 25. And so I've always made it a point that when anybody preaches, anywhere I'm at, to communicate to them how well they did. If they did, I mean, sometimes, somebody preaches and they lay an egg, it doesn't go well. But I've always tried to be a person
You're a huge encourager.
I think it's huge to tell someone that does what you do. A lot of times we compliment people that they don't do what we do. It's easy to compliment a worship leader, somebody who does an art thing. But when you're that, and then you compliment somebody,
you're right.
So to me, I think it kills your pride a little more. But again, lessons that you learn from the moments that you go through. And so it was a great opportunity. We left there, my wife and I, and traveled. And Joel Osteen's dad, John Osteen, was very good to us, gave us a lot of opportunities. I was preaching at their youth group a bunch. And we didn't know what we wanted to do. But I had a heart for the poor. I'd read a Mother Teresa book, and it really got a hold of my heart. This was about 1991, 92. And I was with John Osteen, and we were going to take a job there. We were going to work there. Delenn was going to be a worship leader. I was going to take over the students. It was a huge church. I mean, Osteen's Lakewood was a huge church, running 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 people during those times. And he came out of the back and said, you do not need to come here. He said, I think there's a church in you. And you need to go. I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, you need to go plant a church to reach the poor. He said, I hear that in your language. Go back to Baton Rouge and plant a church to reach the poor. And we went to way south Baton Rouge, like the New Orleans side of Baton Rouge. And that's when Delenn and I launched Healing Place. And she was 23. I was 27. We were babies.
God.
And it had one thought. Let's help the poor. Let's take the gospel to the poor. And that was the original idea of that church plant.
It's so interesting just like listening to your story and the different people that, play a part. And we're all like a conglomeration of these different voices. And I think it's really important that we do take time to reflect and thank God for the people that have played a part in our story. And there's nothing, that's beautiful. Sometimes I'll watch late night Christian TV and I'll still see Brother Swaggart on television and they're preaching. And one of my favorite things that he does is like he keeps his like preacher mic on and he sits on the stage. And when like his grandson is preaching, he'll go, that's good. Amen. So he's in like, he's like a commentator. I'm like, that's a vision for my life. I want to one day be a VU. I don't have to be lead anymore, but give me the mic in the audience.
The voice preaching.
You better preach.
Come on.
It's like, is that Rich's voice in the audience? That's awesome.
Say that again.
Dakota's preaching this Sunday. I'm going to say, keep me mic'd up in the audience. That's awesome. But the other,
you said something I think is important because I was in a conversation the other day with a leader. And he said these words. He said, I'm a self-made man. And you know what I thought? I'm sorry. I feel sorry for you. I'm so sorry you're a self-made man. Because reality is you're not. Someone laid a brick in the wall. Somebody dug a foundation. Somebody has been there for you. You may not want to acknowledge it, and it may be painful, but nobody is. There's people that have made deposits, that have paid great prices, the missionaries. I mean, you know those stories. I think about the Buntains. We're all standing on the Buntain's shoulders. We think about the Wilkerson. we're all standing on their shoulders. We're all standing on these shoulders of people that paid a great price in a different season, in a different way. And I think the smart young guys that I have great respect for, like yourself and some of your friends, are the ones who acknowledge that. Because honor is still the way. It's still the way.
Well, hopefully it's a sign of just humility and just honesty that someone went before us, and I started, started from the bottom. Now I'm here. Well, I don't know. I think we all have a different starting point.
Yeah.
And I think the ones of us that can acknowledge where we started from, it's actually empowering. I think it's actually attractive. This is maybe sort of a weird analogy, but I think it's fun to talk about. I remember whenever it was when Barack Obama was running for president, I guess that must have been 2008 or something. I don't know if anyone can, whenever he first became president, we're in political times right now. And so media, both sides, is just destroying people in whatever way they can. And we'll avoid the political conversation for today. But I just remember there was a preacher of a church that Barack Obama was going to named Jeremiah Wright, who preached a strong liberation theology message. And they began kind of clipping and soundbiting him. Right. And I don't know any of these people. The point was that Barack Obama did know him well, had been a part of that congregation, and people were finding clips from Jeremiah Wright and saying that Barack Obama fully stands with whatever this man is preaching. Endorsing all this. Yeah. And I just remember when they were hounding him, Barack Obama just said, hey, I cannot deny his influence and his friendship in my life. I don't know everything he stands for. I don't know everything he's done. I can't endorse all of that, but I can't lie and deny that I've known him, that he's played an influence in my life just as much as I can't with. And he starts going through all these other names. And I actually found it to be really like, well, that's actually the truth. Like how many different people in my life have played such a big part, good, bad, ugly, like where they're at today, what they're doing today. I want to be a person that I don't have to duck and run and say, yeah, I know that person. And yeah, that person brought good into my life. I think that's the truth for all of us. And, even as we're talking right now.
It's the truth in Scripture.
Yeah, well, totally.
I mean,
totally. But
think about it.
When we're just saying this, because I always forget, I just think it's interesting when I think about your life and just the different people that you've been around and the movements you've been around. And even I always forget about how John Osteen really in so many ways spoke. Yeah. The church
wrote us a $400 check before there was a church. First one to give me a check for the church.
But we see what Joel Osteen's doing today, and you're like, wait a minute, do you know who his daddy was?
Oh,
I'm not taking
somebody.
Saying that was not taking anything away from Joel Osteen. No. It's just going, this is spiritual heritage. This is spiritual inheritance. John Osteen, I'll go watch some of these YouTube clips of this man. This man was dangerous. He's up there preaching. I saw him one time teaching, and they had like a jib shot. He turns to the jib that's like the floating camera with an arena of people, and he starts preaching to the TV audience. This man knew multimedia. This man knew social. He was TikTok before there was TikTok. Yeah, he was. I'm like, he's looking direct to camera with a live room. This was a leader and a forerunner. And today we can see someone like Joel Osteen. And once again, I'm not trying to disrespect or take away something from Joel Osteen. I'm saying it's a beautiful part of God's plan that he stands on the shoulders of who went before him. And I think there's
some— be the first to tell you that.
For sure. I just think when I look at your life, you have such an ability to connect with, I think, everyone. You're not judgmental. People trust you with their deepest secrets. People find peace, solace, solidarity in you. You're someone who's fun. And I just think you've lived such a big life. And when I think about it, it's like you've been around crisis, you've been around redemption, you've seen forgiveness, reconciliation, you've seen big, you've seen small. With all of it, I think it makes you sort of a non-anxious presence. That's like, we gonna be okay. And I can find the good in that situation. Would you say that's a good assessment from what I'm kind of articulating a little bit?
It's humbling and we try. I've married well, I've got a godly wife. And I've been very fortunate to be around people that have been great examples. I've been fortunate to be around people that have given me grace in my worst day, because I've had some bad days, and I'm thankful for the friendship and grace and your own journey of repentance and healing and truth that you go through, and you want to look at those things, but. It's and you want to be able to see people through the right lens.
Very good.
And the lens that I try to see life through is Romans 8:28. That you know what, God, until you take your last breath, God has a chance. God has a moment. There's still a move to make in God until you take your last breath, until someone else, takes their last breath. There's always hope. There's always an opportunity. I mean, you built this church on that. And you have wounded people, broken. You have people walk in your church every weekend that are giving God one more chance. You have people that walk in your church every weekend that this is the worst week of their life.
Whew.
And you are there to say, we love you, we see you, we're here for you. You preach it. You and your wife, who my wife thinks is the greatest thing on the planet, have embodied that. This church has, and there are others too. You know what I love? I go to some churches, you do too. You travel some, and we both travel. Sometimes we meet each other in these places, but you go to some churches and nobody even knows them, and they're doing a great job, and they're just reaching broken humanity, and you just love it. And I think there are so many people that wake up every day trying to make a difference, trying to help people. And I'll never forget, Joel, when Dylan and I went to the Osteens. And we were there, about 7,000 people in there. He's got the camera getting ready to roll. He's getting ready to go 28 minutes for his television show. It's any second now. This is a top 3 moment that marked me in my life. He's getting ready to go to camera. And at that moment, he looks and says, oh, Dodie, look, there's the Sanchez's. We're counting down. 3, 2. Okay? He stopped. There's 7,000 people waiting there. Okay? There's the Sanchez's. Oh, gosh. They lost their baby 2 weeks ago. Y'all come up here. I'm on the front row thinking, does he know where we're at? He's talking to 2 people in front of 7,000 people. Y'all come up here. Baby, get over here. Dodie, love on them. Pray for them. Y'all. So he just starts calling names. Y'all come over. Usher, Roger, Ricardo, come over, love on them. Took about 3 minutes. We love you. We speak life over you. And then he said this. Now listen, Ricardo, y'all take them to lunch. They're going to need lunch today. I need 3 or 4 people, give them a couple $100 before they leave here. You give them 100, you got 100? He's navigating this moment, this precious Hispanic couple, weeping, lost a child. When he gets done, then he says, welcome to Lakewood. It's so good to have you here today. Starts this program. I get emotional thinking about Rich. I sat there and I said, I want to do that the rest of my life. I was 27 years old. That's what I want to do. I want to reach the world serving one. I want to serve one person by reaching the world. You can do both. I always thought you had to do either or. You either had to care for the one and then not do the multitudes, or you either had to care for the multitudes and ignore the one.
Good.
And so you try to live this life, and your church is that. You do outreach. You care for broken humanity. Church of the Highlands is that. I feel like Healing Place made that attempt. I think there are other great churches that we're friends with. That was when I left. Dylan and I sat there stunned, and we left, and we got in the car, and I remember we wept and said, we want to do that the rest of our life. That's what we want to do. We want to build a church like that, whether it's 100 or 10,000, where in the moment you can stop and say, are you okay? Come up here. Somebody, give them some chicken. Somebody help give them a Bible. Somebody take them in the back and help them through their trauma. That to me was Jesus. He had that. Jesus did that every day. Big, small, big, large, micro, Mac. The life of Jesus is that nonstop. Beautiful. And so I feel like that's the goal of all of us. And so I feel like my role in the body of Christ is try to remind people of that. That's why we do what we do.
I know. It's annoying when you're in the middle of a conversation and someone interrupts like this, but I wouldn't do it unless it was really, really important. Listen, this is an ad-free podcast. However, we do tell you about some of the great things that we are doing right here on the ground in Miami, Florida. And I want to speak to you about something that really means a lot to me, and that is VooCon 2025. Are you looking to grow? Do you want to build community? Do you want to strengthen your faith? Something tells me the answer is yes. That's why you're watching Mature Me. Well, I want to invite you to Miami, Florida, June 19th through the 21st for VuCon 2025. Listen to me. This is going to be our greatest year yet. Our theme this year is Dying to Be Different. It's 3 incredible days in the Watsco Arena. You've never, ever experienced the power of God until you've got into an arena with 7,000 other people lifting up one name. The entire convention is all about encountering God, equipping the church, and empowering the next generation of leaders. This year, we've got Sadie Robertson, we've got Darius Daniels, we've got Vu Worship, and trust me, there are so many other guests that are coming. Right now, quickly, go to vucon.com to get registered, and I will see you in Miami in June. Let's get back to the combo. And so it was 92 or 93?
That would have been 92, right before we started our church.
And the church started in 93?
Church started December of 92. It was a brilliant idea to start it in December on a Wednesday night. Go do something nobody's ever done. And there's a reason why it don't work. We relaunched our church 6 weeks after we launched it because it was so bad.
You make me laugh.
We had 12 people there first Wednesday night. I preached so fast. I got done with my sermon in 10 minutes. What do you do when you get done? I preached it 3 times in a row. I was so nervous. Lip was quivering, nauseated when we launched. The day we launched our church was horrible. It would have been one of the top worst sermons I've ever preached in my life. It was terrible. I didn't know what I was doing. Wednesday night.
What did you preach? Had you already named
something?
Was the church already called Healing Place? Like you had that? Or
Trinity Christian Center. Somebody stuck a name on it, a healing place for a hurting world.
Okay.
We borrowed Osteen's An Oasis of Love for a Hurting World.
Okay.
We changed it. My mother-in-law named it. 5 years later, we changed the name of Church Healing Place. But we started in
Trinity Christian Center is what you began.
Yeah.
Because you had a great, you understood the Trinity pretty good at that point?
Zero. I knew nothing about the Trinity. Somebody else stuck the name on it. And Delynn led worship a cappella. We had no musicians.
Which was powerful. She can take
And
us
then
there.
one of our first musicians was a saxophone player.
Ooh.
For real. And do you know how hard it is to get your worship on with Kenny G? Everybody slow dancing, trying to date, trying to holler at each other because you're trying to mag on somebody over here because you got that. We led worship with a saxophone player.
Wow.
It was terrible. Delynn could sing.
Yeah.
And her sister, Candace. We relaunched in January with 32 people.
Any idea what was the sermon thought you think on that way? Can you go back all the way there?
It was Ephesians 2, and it was some random. Do you know, you've never done this because you're a great communicator.
Yeah, right.
Have you ever had a thought that made sense to you?
Of course.
But when it goes live, it makes zero sense?
Yes.
It was brilliant in your mind, but when it came out, it was discombobulated. And I got done, and I got nervous, which made me preach faster. And so when I got done, Delyn's looking at me like I'm wrapping up. She's like, so I run it back again. And it was worse. When you run something back 3 times and it gets worse, you need to retire it. So so we got done. It was bad for a couple more Wednesday nights. We did like a Christmas night. It was terrible. We did a post.
Why do I get so much joy?
Because we all have been there. It was tragic. And then we kicked it off with 32 people on a Sunday, number. And then we hit our first Easter. Had 72 people, which that's a big deal when you get from 36.
That's what Jesus had. He sent the 72 out.
Yeah, we said 72. Numbers.
32, just a little less than Christ.
That's it. And
I started putting meaning on everything.
Yeah, and we put and we got done with that night, that morning, and Dylan and we thought this is gonna work. We're good. It's gonna work.
We're gonna figure this out.
We're gonna figure this out. We had 70-some people. We're in a room to seat 120, so it felt good that day.
120. That's
and we did a little. Dylan did a little Sandy Patty special.
Ooh.
Worked that little Sandy Patty. Ooh. I did a little illustration with a lamb by myself, and it was like a little watch the lamb. Come on, watch. Remember those songs back in the day that were like a talking song?
Yeah.
It's like they'd sing a little bit and they'd be like, "Daddy, Daddy."
Yeah.
Where's that violin? All those songs, we went to the shop and got a violin.
I mean, Carmen was the best. You shut your face. I wrote the book. 10.
This
Why
was
is he counting backwards? Why is he counting backwards?
Yeah. It's like a Ray Boltz, John Michael
Ray
Talbert,
Boltz.
Kind of a talking song.
Daddy, Daddy.
It's always a daddy, daddy. It's always a little boy and an old man playing a fiddle.
Man, when you talk about have you ever had a thought that was so clear and then you get up, yes, that is the demise of every communicator. It's like, this was so good in the shower in my brain. I like T.D. Jakes when he says about preaching. What does he say? He says, study yourself full. That's a good thing to do. Think yourself clear. Pray yourself hot. let yourself go. That's always been those little 4 points. I'm like, yeah, I could have used that a lot earlier in life. And I'm still trying to sometimes figure it out.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when I hear you tell this story about like starting Healing Place, and one moment I'm gonna tell my story about Healing Place, which is good. But like I was there and it's still going today. It's beautiful church. You built this incredible church. But when you talk about like the origin story of it, it sort of sounds like the struggle bus, like kind of finding like what we are and how we do it, which I think is really encouraging. Anyone who's out there is trying to mature and grow. And I want to believe the people that are listening to this podcast are pastors, leaders, or leaders in their own right, trying to get going. And sometimes it's fun and encouraging to hear these stories because, listen, Healing Place Church, which is still going to this day, is massive and significant and so helpful. I was there and witnessed like what it is and has continued to become. How did you is there anything you could think and reflect on of I think you so have your own authentic voice as a preacher and teacher. I think sometimes you kind of undermine it a little bit in your own way because I think your humor is sort of self-deprecating, but you're a brilliant communicator. You know how to connect. I felt like when I went to Healing Place Church, this was a place that had its a strong identity. It's not like maybe you might have borrowed a tagline from John Osteen, but by the time I got there, I couldn't tell what was borrowed and what was authentically Dino Rizzo. Is there anything that you can reflect on?
It's a good
putting all the things on 60, but how have you found your voice? How have you found your way of doing it? You are the godfather. You are the pastor to so many pastors and the leader to so many leaders. You think you just stumbled into that, or?
Yeah, I think some of that. I mean, you always you kind of find it in the solitude alone. You start, God starts refining you. It's on the anvil. As God is shaping you, and you're trying to be shaped. But I would probably say Dylan and I have tried to stay true to outreach, and have tried to stay true to loving people. I think the call to help hurting humanity, help hurting people. We try to keep that focus. There's so many things that can pull you. It's easy to drift. When we started building that church and doing multiple services, and we built that big old building and raising a boatload of money, and multiple services and staff and hiring and school, all these things you do. I always had to make sure I was coming back to what we're here to help hurting humanity. We're here to be a healing place for a hurting world. Hurting people. And it takes healed people to help hurting people. It takes people that have resources to help those that have reduced opportunities. So we were always having to get back to the center, because you can drift every day. You could be pulled, you could be shaped by other people. I never forget, I went and preached for Tommy Barnett, and I was in a weird mood. It was I was late 30s. We'd been going for about 10 years. And I was in this weird mood that everybody was doing a lot of teaching, a lot of sitting on stools, a lot of, contemplating, a lot of missional language. It was like this high level language and real learned. And man, that's just not, I'm going to tell a story, make people laugh, give them cry. And I remember I tried to go into that vein for a little bit, just real teaching. And I did some creative, weird, intellectual thought with Tommy Barnett sitting there, who is the most encouraging person on the planet. And I got done preaching, and it didn't feel right. It's like, David was Saul's armor. It's all this whole thing and I remember afterwards, he was like, wow, that was good. That was interesting. Great. I'm like, okay, that must have not went well. And then you get over yourself. Who's the number one person to get over yourself? I think that year God dealt with me, and there were some significant things that took place in our church. We had started helping people fighting addiction, and George Bush had mentioned us in a State of the Union address, which there had not been a church mentioned in about 40 years. We were starting to have these hurricanes. Yeah. God was using us as a regional, and we started becoming known for serving. I wrote the book Servolution. All these things started coming about. And I finally realized I help hurting people. Quit trying to be anything else. Be comfortable in your skin. I preached a year later at the LA Dream Center. And when you're there, it's just, being at the LA Dream Center is amazing. And I got done. Tommy pulled me aside and said, you know what? So this would have been 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
He pulled me aside and he said, I heard you last year and it was good. And God used it. He said, what you did tonight, do that the rest of your life. That's your voice. that's your message. Just put a different frame around it. But that's who you are. Preach that message. And it was like, again, a father, an older brother, somebody who we all admire, that was endorsing, vouching, speaking over what God was saying to me, to just be who God, be who you are, be you.
Yeah.
And I think that was a significant time for me. And I think it now gives me a lens and a vantage point when younger guys or people are struggling to try to, and you kind of feel like, you know what? They're trying to be somebody they're not, and that's not your voice. And so you try to be that. And so, you just try to get comfortable in your skin the way God made you. I'm an outreach guy. And, when I preach, I tell stories. I'm a circular preacher.
Yep.
I'm at a church right now with one of the greatest communicators that I love the most, Pastor Chris, but he and I are different. And he's so secure to allow someone like me to be a part of that. And he's brought that out. There's probably nobody who's brought more confidence into my communicating other than Chris Hodges the last decade, because he's so encouraged me. He's helped me refine it. And I think I would believe you become you stay a lifelong learner as a communicator.
So good.
I think you've got to keep doing that. I mean, it's as good as all of us, you are, and others. We got to keep listening and learning and crafting and listening to people. And so, you keep learning. So I'm trying to help people.
I find it really encouraging that at 60 years of age, you're even talking about the last decade of communication. And I think that is it right there. It's like, we never stop growing. We never stop learning. And even this idea of like being ourselves, it's so simple, but it can be so difficult and so hard.
Yeah,
that our desire is to do a good job. Our desire is to be victorious and to be helpful. And we're just trying to land on what part is me and what part is not me. And I think in my journey,
takes a minute.
Yeah, it takes a little while. And I think that if there's anything to take out of that for anybody, for whatever line of work they find themselves in,
right,
ultimately where you're going to find real fulfillment and you're going to find real effectiveness is when you get God's plan and purpose aligned with your authentic self. God anoints you, not the copycat you. And I think if anything from your story is that it's a journey. It's been a journey for me. And I'm 40. I still don't think I've discovered my voice. I'm still like Simba looking for my complete roar, if you will. But I think I'm a lot clearer today than I was even 5 years ago or even 3 years ago. And I think step by step, we continue to refine who we are. And even just clarifying it, it took you like, oh, wait a minute, I'm an outreach guy, and whatever the language is there for you. But if you think about Healing Place, if you think about Servolution, if you think about even what you do in ARC with Serve Day, some of your greatest, I'm using the word effectiveness right now, maybe the better word is maybe your greatest impact that's been seismic, that's been scalable, comes back down to you playing your part in a clear vein of saying, oh, wait a minute, this is the part of the body of Christ that I am. And the more that I lean into that, the more I can see effective fruit, attached to it. I remember it must have been 2009, 2010, 11, 12, I don't know, in that 4-year window. But I was anywhere from 25 to 27 years of age is what I'm thinking. And I got invited to come and preach at Healing Place's, I think it was called the Devoted Conference for Jason Laird, AKA Tweez. And I'd always known the name Dino Rizzo. Tweezy, he won't like that.
Tweezy.
I had always known the name Dino Rizzo, but I had never really, to my knowledge at that point, like shook your hand or ever been in your church. And I got invited, I don't know, it was maybe like the Friday night or the Thursday morning, I don't know what it was. Maybe a day session or a night session. But then maybe the email got tacked on that, hey, Pastor Dino, kind of like you with Jimmy Swagger getting a tap, would like you to do the weekend service. I'm like, wait a minute.
And I was not there.
Yeah, you weren't there. You were there for the start of the conference. And I remember you had like a sweatsuit on, like with the pants that went, and like everywhere you went, there was always like dudes around you. And you were like, my man, like hugged me. You like let us go in like the green room, like the suite that was so nice. And like there was food and team. It's like, hey man, you got it this week. I'm not going to be here, but just go for it. I'm like, wait, this is the biggest room I've ever been in. He wants me to do his Sunday morning. I do youth talks. Like, it was so empowering and it made me just believe in myself so much. And I caught so much of who you were with you even being away. They always say leadership is best seen in your absence, not your presence. There was such a spirit of hospitality, generosity, not in some weird, bizarro Christian. It was just like people loving you and I think it was a tangible sense of, now that I know the man Dino Rizzo and I know the woman Dino Rizzo, it so reflected your personality and your nature and your character. But to me, it was a big part of my story at 25, 26 years of age, that here is a guy who has built this world-renowned church, and without him even being there, hey man, you take this Sunday. It's like, it's true. Like, I want
your dad well. So.
Did you get bad reports that Sunday?
No, and I knew Don Cherie. I mean, I knew Denny. I mean, you guys are the best. I mean, to this day. I mean, when you preach, I take notes. When Don Cherie preached at Motion, I took notes. And there's been a few times I've preached your stuff, your thought. And I always tell people, if you got a good steak, I'll put it on my grill and I'll serve it up. And so, I remember, I think I talked to your dad or something, and I was like, hey, can Richie do the weekend? I'm not going to be there. And he was like, yeah, I don't know if he's done a lot of weekends like that, but sure. And I was like, I'm going to give him the weekend. And like I think Dylan and I went and preached somewhere. I think she was there. I think she stayed.
Yeah.
And I think I went and spoke somewhere. But you were one of kind of the first guys I met from a lot of your friends and your kind of, stage of ministry age-wise. I mean, a lot of your friends are
boy band.
Yeah, the boy band. But, I knew you first. And I think when I came back, everybody was like, man, that was phenomenal, incredible. And, we'd have you back. We had just opened up that building. Yeah. I mean, it took a while to get built, with Hurricane Katrina, with all that we went through with that, with people, with suffering Louisiana. We put the building, we never quit building it, but we put it on pause for 9 months, 15 months, help people. Cost way more than we thought. In the middle of doing that building, we ended up going to buy a dream center, because it was just who our church was, the way we were wired. But and then to be able to have a front row seat in what God's done here at VU is just incredible. I mean, you're shaping the body of Christ. You're shaping, a church now. And I love how God connects all the dots. He connects dots well.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, and sometimes we don't see him doing it, but he's connecting dots. Well, and that's why you gotta be careful how you treat people. You never know how that is a very vital part of your pathway and in your life. And I know the way you and Don Cherie and your team handles it. I felt that way when I walked in today. Everybody was kind, loving, caring, noticing, concerning, considerate, which I think is an important word today, to be considerate of others. And so it's that same spirit is here.
I felt like one time, because we're talking about VU, a little bit of our story, and I do think it's important that we realize, faith, it's in retrospect that I can connect dots. And it's like, oh, now I see God was there and he used that. And oh, that was a failure, but he redeemed it. And that was not that big of a success that I thought, but God used that person. And I don't know if I've told you this story before, but there was a time that I think that you gently, lovingly, in the coolest way ever, like only the Godfather could do, rebuked me. And I don't think you'd use that word, and it wasn't a rebuke. But after that first time ever preaching that, I preached at the church a few more times.
Sure.
You became a friend and you became a mentor and a voice. And, Dad adores you. And so Dad trusts you. And I think we were in that kind of window when we were like maybe talking about transitioning. Right now you are filming tonight in the Trinity location that we purchased this past year from Dad, which is a whole other story in itself. But I remember there was a window there where Dad was like, yeah, I think, you're going to take over. And so we kind of started talking transition. And my dad and I have the best relationship, but there was probably some frustration. And I remember one time venting in your office at Healing Place. And I think where there was a big meal, this is I learned a lot of this from you too. Like I've always kind of pastored our church and even done a lot of discipleship, sort of like in a group setting and like, hey, let's go over there and chat for a second. I think your extrovert personality, you're so good.
Italian way.
Well, that's that Godfather thing that I got from you. But you always, you're like, hey, come over here. And so, hey, tell me what's going on. How's it going? And I think I started to kind of like just articulate, nothing big, but just going, I wish Dad would let me, run some more things. If he'd let me, run this budget or run this team. And you kind of just listened and you said it to me, man. It was beautiful. For the guy who has a speech impediment, this was perfect alliteration. He said, well, if you want to run it, you got to raise it. And just the language, if you want to run it, you're going to actually have to be a person who raises it. And you were speaking towards something much, much bigger, which is slow down. You're critiquing. You're being negative around things that you are not even privy to. And I think what actually is going on in your heart, Rich, is that maybe you either slow down and serve, or you step out and honor God with what he's calling you to do. And ultimately, everyone knows the story that, Dad really sent us out and we stepped out and we did have to go learn how to raise it in order to run it. But that little language, if you want to run it, you're gonna have to raise it. And it was just the most gentle, cool little Godfather rebuke. Do you remember any of that or not really?
I just know, I don't remember all that. I remember us talking. I remember that, and I had such, I saw a lot. Again, I've always seen a lot, and I continue to see a lot in you and your wife and your team here. But you're trying to get people to play the long game. You wish everything was a short par 3. Yeah. It is a long par 5. The kingdom of God is a long par 5. Slow down, take your time. It takes a lifetime. And we're not building, we're not setting up prefab walls. We're laying brick by brick. Every Sunday is a brick. Every meeting, every moment, every hair. And, you wish the church was, I thought about this the other day. I was somewhere and I was so glad for the escalator. I'm glad for escalators when I go play. Now that I'm 60, I love an escalator. But I was somewhere the other day and the escalator was broken. And I had to climb up about 4,000 steps. And I got to the top of the steps. I thought, wow, I forgot how hard it is to take the steps. Thank God for the escalator. And when I was standing up there and I thought about, church is not an escalator. Building a church, building the kingdom, building a good company, building a good marriage, building a good family, building deep friendships. We think escalator. Let's get on it. My personality and my gift and just the aura is going to bring me into it. No, it's not. It is a long set of steps. And that's how life works. Anything great takes the steps. And so I'll tell church planners that. Okay. Oh, you want to play in church? Oh, you better be ready to take the steps. There's no elevator. There's no escalator. There's only steep, hard steps.
At our Design District location where we usually record from, there's an elevator and then there's steps. Yeah. And I always tell the team, I'm like, leaders take the steps, yo. You want the elevator, Pastor Rich? Leaders take the steps. It's funny because the inventor of the escalator, he invented the escalator so you could get to the top faster, meaning he wanted you to keep walking, but then when he invented it, people stopped stepping and they just stood. And it's amazing how we live in a world today that there's great advancements like technology, and even things like AI that are out there. These things are to advance and help us to go further faster. They're not meant to make us live a life of simple pleasure, comfort, and never stretching ever again. I'm not against an escalator, but if you want an escalator, move those legs, bro, unless they don't work, because the technology, the advancement was to your betterment. It wasn't to make you weaker and smaller. And taking the steps is the humble way of taking a journey, I think, of faith. This is a faith journey. And, I think when you're speaking to this stuff, I think it's so important that like you actually have some moral authority. You actually have some life experience to the words that you're saying. The world that we live in today, whether it's TikTok teaching and social media preaching, I'm not against none of that. But we have elevated where like knowledge is everywhere. But we want something more than knowledge. We want experience and we want wisdom. I think content is great, but like it's not just what's being said, who's saying it. That matters to me at this point. It's like what's the spirit on this? What's been your experience with this principle you're teaching me? And for you to say like, yo, it's the long game. In so many ways, when we look at the last 60 years of your life, it's not this beautiful straight line. It's a path of ups and downs, falling, getting back up. The old Rascal Flatts song, God bless the broken road that led me straight to you. There is some stuff like that where it feels that way. And if we looked at your life, it's like, yo, you've lived lots of different lives. You've had lots of different experiences. And time again, it seems like whatever season that you've been put in, you having that type of a mentality to play the long game, you continue to find yourself in a role of leadership and a voice to those that are hurting, but also a voice to those that hold influence. And I think it's really, really powerful. When you left Healing Place, that was a very hard moment for you.
Yes.
Maybe what was the hardest part, but like, how did you gain strength, resilience, wisdom to even like find what you're doing with art today? Because it's like, it's a whole nother life of significance. And I don't like the word success, but like you've been what you're doing, the work you guys are doing, so successful. I like the word success. I'm sorry. People take that with the wrong impact.
Right.
So I'm trying to land on the right words, but leaving Healing Place is a very hard season for you. What's the hardest part for you on that? How do you mature and grow from all that?
Well, it was a hard season, and it was a season I brought upon myself. So there was no one to blame when you make bad decisions. It takes a minute when you look back on your life and you see a bad season, or you see somewhere where you just you failed, you sinned, you just took your eye off of the gospel. And I spent some counseling and spent some. Delin and I spent a lot of time with the Lord and one another, and some couples that helped us navigate some things in our lives. And I'll never forget one day, a counselor said, we were talking, sometimes somebody would just say something to you, you're like, that's it. I didn't get words for that. It's like sometimes people will preach and you'd be like, oh, that's exactly the way I feel. That's what I feel about my life. That's what I feel about my past. He said something, he said, I've listened to you. He said, I think you took your eye off of God and put them on yourself. And you took your eye off of your wife and your family. And you put them on yourself, and you made decisions about yourself. That always causes pain. Always causes pain. Anytime you take your eyes off of God, your family, your wife, your commitments, others, and you put them on yourself, that's a bad idea.
Wow. Good.
Always bad consequences. At every level, at every situation. And, to be able to find forgiveness, find healing, find a fresh start, find repentance, find restoration, restitution, all these things that God gives us the grace to. He doesn't put a timeline on it. It's not automatic. It's not a conveyor belt. You just go back to what you know in God. And I think Delin and I did that in our life. We said, okay, Lord, how would you want to use us in this next season? Could we be a 2.0 in a life that we've learned from God? It was mainly me. And God, God gave us an opportunity to move to Birmingham, and we immediately I'm grateful to go to Birmingham, and then to be able to be a part of ARC, be a part of Church of the Highlands.
Were you scared going there? Like, is that the wrong? Maybe is that the wrong emotion?
I think because I have a little bit of a missions bent. I was grateful for anything I could do to serve God. None of us got in it to do what we're doing.
Yeah.
You get in it to try to just help people and make a difference. You didn't start VOO for it to be this. There was an original idea that you and Don Sherry had, but it wasn't all this. I mean, God does all these things. You're grateful, and it's in vision and it's in dream. But you would be as happy now if it was half this size, or if you didn't have this platform. We approached it that way in our life, and so for the last 11 years. We've been gone from Baton Rouge about 12 years.
Yeah.
So we've been on team at Highlands and at ARC, and for 11 years. And I've always been an outreach guy. So I was like, I'm going to continue to outreach and help people, see what happens. These other opportunities opened up, and you just continue to get up in the morning and say, okay, how can I be a blessing? Of course, there's a strategy. Of course, there's some goals. Of course, there's team, and there's some why behind the what's. But at the core of what you do is, okay, I'm going to try to be a blessing today. I'm going to try to make a difference in somebody's lives. I'm going to try to, lean into what I'm trying to listen. I'm a pretty simple guy. And so I'm relationally driven. So I'm thinking about relationships. Joyce Meyer said something I thought that really stuck with me about 10 years ago. She says she gets up, her first thought is God, her first thought is others. And then she has a thought about her. She said, that served me well for the last 30 years.
It's beautiful.
Pretty good, I'd say. And so it altered me. And I said, okay, my first thought needs to be God, not the God that I just want to know you so I can use you to do what I do. I want to know you. So my prayer life changed 11 years ago. It's a lot more devotional. I spend a lot more time just knowing him, learning simplicity. And then I get to say, okay, who can I help today? Who needs to be encouraged? Who do I need to reach out to? And then maybe it's like, okay, what are my goals? What are we trying to get accomplished? So I've just kind of taken that stand, and I'm in a great environment. I mean, what is happening at Church of the Highlands with ARC, with friends, And I got great friends around me: John Siebling, Steve Robinson, Chris Hodges, Herbert Cooper, Randy Bezet, Joe Champion. I mean, I got good friends that I am incredibly blessed with. Jeff Little, he's become a friend. Guys like that just
good people.
They're just good people, and I'm grateful for those people in my life.
I like sometimes I hear people talk about the idea seasons of life, stages of life. We do live. We have different experiences in life. We continue to grow and become, and you'll hear this language like I had to reinvent myself. Does any of that land with you? Like, hey, I'm pastoring, now I shift, and now I'm leading an organization that's starting church planters.
It's different.
Like, is there anything you can think about like there, like, oh man, I have this crisis, I move, I'm now like in this process of regaining a new vision, a rebirth, like the difficulty of that. I feel like in so many ways, like you're living your best days and it's so significant what you're doing. But in many ways, you had to reinvent, like how much of your identity gets wrapped up in doing this job. Like I can easily preach. I'm kind of telling myself, I can easily preach. My identity is not in being a pastor. But if tomorrow it's taken from me, I bet I'm going to have to do some
100%
soul searching a little bit. Is there any things that you can like think that you learned like in the reinventing? Because I think that's helpful for people that are trying to mature and grow and go, man, I had this twist or that transition or that turn. I had this job. Now I've got this job. Who am I in all of this?
Yeah. Well, you're right. You do. I think you have to figure out, the scoreboard changes.
There you go.
You've got to be willing to let the scoreboard change. And because your identity, I left Healing Place and my identity was in a scoreboard. Preached on Sunday. I was the pastor. I was the leader of that church. I gave invitations on Sunday. People come to Christ. I was the pastor. It's just it's an incredible privilege by God Almighty. Then I go to Birmingham. I'm leading an organization. It's not the same as a church. There's similarities, but it's different. So you have to relearn. I mean, you have to go to work again. I had to relearn some things. I had to get some coaching. I had to read a bunch. I had to study organizational health. What does church planning look like at this level? And then I'm on a church team. I'm not the pastor. I'm not sitting at the head of the table. I'm sitting at the side of the table. I'm not the main event. I'm a support. I'm there to support Pastor Chris. I'm not, anybody talks, well, he's number one, you're number two. No. I'm here. I don't know what number I am, and it doesn't matter. I'm here to support what God has called. I was the vision carrier. So now I am a vision supporter. So you have to change and you have to die to some things and you have to learn some new things. So I had to learn sitting at a table that I wasn't leading this meeting. So I was used to just leading the meeting, saying what I wanted and looking at my phone, getting a coffee, getting up. No. I'm not getting up and Pastor Chris is leading the meeting. You have to check yourself and realize I am serving here. I am a part of the team. I'm not the team. I'm a part of the team. And I need to send a report in. I've never done that in my life. I got there and it's like we do monthly reports. I've never done a monthly report. What's a monthly report? Who's doing my monthly report? Where's my assistant? I was my assistant. I was doing my monthly report. Me and Delane were sitting up at night doing my monthly report. And
you're so crushing it.
What are you doing? You get over yourself. Get over yourself. Do what you need to do to be a part of the kingdom, be on the team, and to provide for your family. And so I had to learn that the first year or two. Was there bad days? Yeah, there was a couple of days that Pastor Chris had to pull me and said, hey, man, let me help you. I know you're used to leading. So he was so gracious to me. I'd have run me off. He was the most gracious man on the planet. He was very caring, and he would pull me aside and help me navigate this new season. And my wife was great. My wife would be like, check yourself. Be thankful that you're here. Be grateful you have an opportunity. And my wife is good at, you ain't all that. You're not all that. I mean, I tell a story. I never forget one time I preached somewhere at a very big environment, huge environment, one of the biggest stages I've ever been on. And I got done and it was not good. And I came off the stage and she was sitting there and she said, what was that? There's about 20,000 people in this arena. What was that? I said, I don't know. She said, you better get your act together. I didn't come here for that. You did not hear from God. That was not a good message. We've got 4 more today. You better figure
My
something out.
God.
And I went back to a little area that had a little speaker room, and I adjusted some things, and I called on God and pleaded with him. But my wife has been great in this season. She's been the one that, what, we are fortunate, and we are very thankful to be here with the Hodges and to be leading art. Let's be thankful every day. Just be grateful. Be grateful. So I think you shift some of those things in your own heart, and the score is different. I'm not building a church. I'm helping people build churches. I'm not, I go places and preach now, and I'm like, man, I'm just grateful to contribute. I'm just glad to support you. And I hopefully will communicate this Sunday that will build your church. I want to build the church I'm at. I was at a church this week. I'm trying to build that church.
Yeah.
So you just think differently, and you try to do your best in that opportunity.
I'm going to preach that. Get over yourself. Because you know what a lot of people do is they're under themselves or they're beside themselves. You don't want to be beside yourself. The reason why you're beside yourself is because you're not over yourself. And getting over yourself, I think, is so, I hear like, why are you so downcast, oh my soul? Yeah. Put your hope in God. Don't get your hope up, put your hope in. And it's learning how to manage our own emotions. It's learning how to get over our own ego, our own pride, putting those things into check. It teaches easy. It lives hard. It lives hard.
You make it about yourself. Quit making this about you, your pain, your hurt, your situation. This is not about us. This is about, there's only one star in this thing, is Jesus. I'll tell the story. I never forget. I went to go see Billy Graham before he died. Me and Rick Bezet go up to see Billy Graham. We're at Samaritan's Prayer Storm Outreach. Go up to see Billy Graham. When we're there, Billy's there. He's got a cook, a nurse, and there's a guy who goes and pastors him every day. And that dude right there, he's close to Jesus. Left his church and went to pastor one man. Did it for about 5 years. We'll go read the Bible to Billy Graham. That was number one. That was humbling to meet this man. We go in to see Billy Graham. He's older now. His shirt is not buttoned correctly. It's off centered. He's been eating a muffin, and there's a muffin all over him. And he's just sitting there in a chair. And I'm like, where is everybody? What are we? There's no one there. He's got his dog. All he talks about is his dog. He throws the tennis ball, the dog goes and gets it, he comes back. We're asking him all these questions about ministry and like me and Bezet. And he's like, did you see my dog? I said, we're like, okay, tell us, how did you build this? Rich, he didn't want to talk about none of that. He just wanted to talk about his dog, his muffin he just ate. And like there was like a picture on the wall that he was needing straightened. And so we get done. And finally, we're only there for about 15 minutes. And he says, hey, the guy says, Billy, is there any advice, Dr. Graham, you could tell us? He said, yeah, just, listen to your wife. Listen to your wife. Amen. That was it. That was all we got the whole time. And then we said, well, can you pray for us? He said, no, you need to pray for me. He said, I'm not able to read the Bible anymore. I can't see it. I don't feel like the Lord's pleased with me. I'm like, if God ain't pleased with you, I'm going to hell. I'm going to hell right now. And I'll never forget, I get in the car, me and Rick Bezet, and I'm riding down from his house up in Montreat. And I thought, that ain't right. And that ain't right. We'd been down to the museum and been down to his little area, the pulpit that he preached a zillion people to, all these pictures of crusades around the world, massive. And I said, here's the man who's preached the gospel, maybe more than people than anybody in the world, led more people to the Lord than anybody in the world, wrote more. I just started thinking radio, TV. He is up there with a dog, a cook, a nurse, and a pastor, and he's got crumbs all over him, and his buttons are not buttoned right. And I told him, that ain't right, Lord. And I sat there, and in the back of that car, I was steaming, thinking, that's not right. And the Holy Spirit spoke to my heart and said, it's exactly the way I wanted it. Because you thought it was about Billy. It's not about Billy. It's about me. And until you understand that, this will never make sense to you. None of this is about you, Dino. This whole thing is about me. So it's kind of like, you got to check yourself on what you signed up for. And that's honoring God that Billy made much of Jesus. And it's like you leave there, you thought, wow, I need to reevaluate what my life is all about. This is really about, we say it a lot, we sing it a lot, but at the end of the day, he's the only main event. He's the only main character. We are a far distant supporting cast, like in the other room, down the street in the annex. God uses us. It's amazing. It's incredible, but it's not about us.
I love the idea, write your story as God is the main character.
Mm-hmm.
That starts changing all sorts of narratives around quickly. You start talking different. You start thinking different. You certainly start walking different.
Yeah. You see people different.
Yeah, everything about it changes. One of my favorite parts about you are the children that you've raised. I love them.
I got good kids.
Your boy Dylan is a good friend of mine, but your girls, how do you get fruit like that? Like I got our fourth, we have a fourth child. Can you believe this? In 2024,
you and my son are having a child at the same time, which is crazy.
I think I know where. Never mind. I'll stop.
Okay.
I think it was this summer that they. I think they were. Yeah. I think it was on the lake this summer.
It could have been.
Rich, come on, this is not here. Well,
lake life.
Yeah, that lake life. What would anything you like? Just in all your years. I mean, like you've navigated all the different waters, yet still somehow your kids have come out. They love God. You're close with them. I know it's like a big question, but like, what are some handles that come to your mind when it comes just to parenting and like how that's all worked together?
God's grace and a good wife and good grandparents. Dylan's parents are amazing. We've had our bad days. I've failed them. My kids, we talk about that. We've tried to be honest. We've tried to keep honesty in our home the best we can. Continuing to learn that. Even I think it's ever learning your kids, ever learning as a parent. You've not arrived. So we're all learning together as a family in this new season of people getting married, kids. And, your father-in-law gave me great advice. A couple of times I called him and felt like I was not being a good dad, was not being a good parent. Another friend of ours, Jacob Aranza.
Yeah.
Same thing. I've called Jacob several times, not being a good dad, not paying attention, not focusing right. The demand, traveling. I mean, everybody's watching this. They're trying to work. They're trying to live their life. I mean, there's a lot going on today. And, you have to, but, God helps you. And, I've tried to stay in communication. I try to text my kids every morning. We try to talk. I try to talk to them on the phone every day. Some days I don't get to, but you just try to keep those little things a priority. Yeah. I don't think it's the big things. You want to do big things. Tommy Barnett talked about you need to make big moments, and it's important that you have some moments that you remember.
Yeah.
But I think where you win, it's like the ground game.
Yeah.
You win between the tackles. You got to be able to run the ball every once in a while. So I think it's the little things that somebody can do to check on their kid, to stay involved, to be present. You and Don Shree do a great job of that. I saw recently that you had taken one of the boys on a trip with you, and you could tell that, yeah, you were preaching and yeah, you were doing some things, but I promise you on that trip, that was all second. Your priority, is seen, and I know you, was that child that was in front of you. And I think when you're present, be present.
Amen.
And and there's been days I've done that well, and there's been days I've done that terrible. And so you're trying to get better at that, in your life. And I've watched that in, Chris's life. I watched that with friends of mine, John Siebling and others. We all talk about it.
Yeah.
Right now we got grandkids. So you're trying to, do that with your grandkids, which is amazing.
What is the different feeling between having a son, a daughter versus a granddaughter, grandson?
The best. It's the best.
I
mean, it's just fun. It's all fun. It's all fun. You ain't got to worry about the discipline side of things. You ain't got to check on nothing like that. You just drive the car. You ain't worried about how to put gas in it, change the oil. You're just driving it. You just go over there and have a blast with it. I mean, I every day I get it. So we have a deal. Every day I get a picture of Harlow, our granddaughter. Every day I get a picture. Every day I get a video. That's our deal. And, and we've, I've had generous people around me in my life. I think generosity is important. I don't think you need to spoil your kids. I think they've got to learn to work hard.
Yeah.
Our kids have a good work ethic. But I think also too that, let's be generous and let's, I just think that's why my dad was a generous man. It shaped my heart, shaped my life.
That's who you are, no doubt about it. ARC is doing amazing things. As you sit here today with me, what do you see for the church? What do you see for ARC right now as you guys are planting? What's your hope?
Yeah. Well, we're learning stuff every year. I mean, like a church, you're building a church and every year you learn something.
Yep.
You probably leave these offices and some days you think, man, we did it right today. We were a good church. There's some days you leave and think we didn't get it right today. Man, we didn't move the ball down the field. We weren't what we promised. You know, I used to leave Healing Place thinking we were a healing place today for hurting humanity. There were some days I left and thought we missed the mark. We can do better. So I think with church planning, it's always about we need to do better to support a church planning, a couple. We need to make sure they're healthy. We need to make sure we give them every bit of newest training possible, whatever we're learning right now. So we just launched 35 churches in 2024.
Wow.
So we're trying to extract everything we can from those to make sure that those that are planning churches in 2025 not only learn the history and those transferable principles that always work, but then also to learn exactly from the planter who planted this year.
Yeah.
So that they can get to a great launch day and they can be healthy in their marriage, in their money, in their ministry. You know, and we ask a lot of questions now about your model of ministry. Who did you learn ministry from? And you know, and then their mentors. Are they connected? Do they have a support system? Do they have spiritual fathers in their life? So we do our best to try to walk with people through that. You know, again, we're not a denomination. Every church that plants is autonomous. We're trying to get them to the best launch possible because there's going to be the dip.
Yeah.
We all know that. And I think the other thing too is that, you know, church planting is not for the faint. It's full contact sport these days. You better be ready. There's an enemy out there. There's spiritual battle. You're out there, you know, for the heart of souls of humanity. I mean, the scales are legit. And so you better know what you're asking for when you want to go plant a church in Cleveland. You want to go launch a church up in Winston-Salem. You want to go make a difference, you know, out in Killeen, Texas, or out in Portland, Oregon. You better be ready these days. It ain't just all fun. Oh, let's go plant it. Whoa. Oh, no. You're going to get hit in the mouth. It's four-wheel drive. It ain't two-wheel drive.
You ain't watching the game. You're playing the game.
Yeah,
last time I checked, when I go and watch the Dolphins play, no one touches me. Guess who they tackle? The one who's carrying the ball.
That's it.
And so you start getting tackled when you start carrying something. Is there anything that you can like quickly see like in the last 10 plus years of doing this? Are the challenges today in 2024, 2025 really, are those sounding different from whatever you saw in, you know, 10 years ago? Like, is there some trends that you see? Like,
there's probably different limitations and there's different opportunities. So there's some limitations on facilities, where, money, you know, different places. Some cities are saturated, got great churches. Other cities there's population growth and there needs to be new churches. There's undersaturation. So you got to know those things. You got to know your city, got to do your research.
Yeah.
But then there's some great opportunities now with some other type of spaces and some other type of being able to launch. A lot of guys are launching now with a little bit more resources. We're seeing some of the church planters a little older. You know, they're not in their 20s as much. They're in their 30s. We're getting ready to launch a couple right now that's like 42, 44, which I think is great. They've been through some things. They've proven themselves well. They're coming from a healthy environment. They were successful in what they did before. They're not running from anything. They're not offended. They're not mad. You know, so you're trying to make sure, you know, your backstory is important for your next story. And it's like, you know, and I've seen this, Rich, how you end the last chapter makes a big difference on that next chapter.
Absolutely.
And so often, you know, are you planning a church running from something? Are you planning a church because you know more than everybody else? So we try to spend a whole lot more time now knowing the backstory so that you can have the best front story, the best next story possible. So I think that's been a big change for us. Let's know that better. So let's get professionals. Let's get counselors. Let's do some due diligence. Let me check all your referrals. Actually call them on the phone. Find out what's up with why you're transitioning, what's going on with this next season of your life.
That's a
I
word.
think as an organization, we're doing more due diligence, working harder, so that when churches like yourself or others give finances to launch a new church, we're trying to steward that opportunity.
Yep.
The best, just like you would do with the new campus.
Yep.
You want them to get the best start possible. So
Very good.
I think we're working harder than ever on that. And it's, and I think it's paying off. Last year, our launch attendance, the first Sunday, I think the average of all those churches was 460.
Wow.
So that's a good launch Sunday.
Yeah.
And, so we're trying to, get that number up as possible so it can be strong and it can be there for the right reason. And you see that right now. I mean, there's a lot of criticism to the church, man. There's a lot of people, man, that's their thing right now. It's what's wrong with the church. And I've just decided to not go that route. I like what's right with the church, what's right with the Great Commission, what's right with the kingdom. And I think there's a lot right with the kingdom. Yeah, there's pain. There's some stuff that's not going well. But there's a whole lot of people who love God and trying their best to plant a good church or do a good missions trip or, do a good homeless outreach. I mean, what you guys do with outreach. I was out there a little while ago, I was talking to Jam. She's the outreach. We talk all the time. She's in a group text with about 30 churches that do outreach. And we're constantly talking about what you guys are doing for Christmas, what we do for Serve Day, opportunities with Convoy of Hope, giving out groceries. You guys have given out tons of groceries in this community, caring for people. And that's what I love about the church. I think the church right now is more dialed into the hurt and the pain of humanity. I think we're leaning into those that are trying to figure out sobriety, leaning into those that are going through pain in their own life. And that's what I love about the church right now.
I think you're speaking right to so many things that matter, like criticism and feedback. It's going to come. And I think that you should listen to it from time to time. I think you should learn from it. You shouldn't be led by it. Yeah. And I think what you're talking about, the heart of how something starts, I think this is important for anyone who's out there listening, who's a church planner. But I suspect there's even more people that are listening that are members or something that's going to rally around a church plant. It really matters how something starts. So many things start today with the wrong kind of heart. What's the wrong heart? I'm starting out of frustration. I'm starting out of offense. Ooh, here's a big one. I've seen this happen. I'm starting out of a spirit of division. That's not the soil you want to go plant your life into. The soil you're looking for is vision and Great Commission.
Yeah.
See how I'm rhyming all these words right now? Like that, you want to lead into something that there's a holy fire that God's led us to something. We're not listening. We're not taking feedback from critics. And we're not starting this thing or birthing this thing out of a spirit of offense or frustration with, they wouldn't let me do this or division.
And nobody's doing anything.
All of that stuff.
I always tell people, it's got to be the language of honor. So I tell every church player this. When you're in a city and somebody says, why you're planting a church? Yeah, I'm coming alongside of all the other great churches.
Teach them.
In our community.
Teach them.
Hey, we're just one of
Teach them.
other great churches in our city. When I run into that church planner, he's like, yeah, I'm going to that city. When I hear these words, because there's no one, I just pinch them. No, don't ever say that.
Dog, you in America.
Say that. That there's no. You mean it? I had somebody tell me he was describing the city he was going to, and then he tells me the city, and I'm like, what are you? There's like, do you think no one has ever?
There's 33.
Yeah, great, amazing churches. So
it's big.
Hey, so I want to come alongside of those 33 churches, and I feel like my wife and I can add value to what the God is doing in the kingdom. So you're trying your best to get them in that language of honor. Super important.
Spiritual superiority is the death of so much. That we think we've got it better. It's just we all need each other. It's the capital C church. What I so appreciate about ARC. And everything's got its flaws. Every organization, 100%. Our church, like looking under the hood, there's things we're always wanting to improve and tweak. We're not a perfect church, but I do believe it's a healthy house, or it's committed to being healthy. I think at different times, I put some weight on from time to time. I got to cut it back. Like I just know in my own life right now, I'm in a cutting season, carnivore diet. But like staying healthy is constant work. It's not like we've arrived at health. We're always tweaking things. We're always improving things. But what I so appreciate about ARC is the mentality, and I think the nature and the character of humility, which is like, we are not God's gift to the earth. We are wanting to help people launch and come alongside them. That alongside them language is so important. And I know for even us here at VU, like our church is one of many great churches in Miami. The hope of the world is not VU Church. The hope of the world is the church.
Yeah.
The devil is not afraid of a big church or your local church. He is afraid of a united church. And so often unity just begins in language. How was Babylon destroyed? Through the division of language, the scattering of the tongue. And if we could just get better at just appropriately talking about one another, certainly publicly, but then also privately. And if our church planners and leaders, me, I'm in this, I'm not just it's like going, yo, we're coming alongside. There's a lot of great churches in Miami. There's a lot of different churches, a lot of different people. And so go find the church that best fits you and what your values are and how you're trying to do that. But I got to be for all these places if we're going to make a difference and if we're going to be the hope of the world. And so I commend you in that. I know these days there's a lot of people that write and criticize and comment, but I'm thankful for you guys continuing to blaze a trail, continuing to champion local churches and help guys. Thank you for your investment into my life, and thank you for loving us. I've only felt celebrated, gently rebuked from time to time, celebrated and encouraged, and we're so grateful. We call this the Mature Me podcast, and so we always kind of bring it around towards the end saying, what's an area of your life right now at 60 years of age, wow, that you're trying to mature in?
Priority. I think, I'm a yes guy. I love a lot of things. And my pastor gets on me about that. My wife gets on me about that. My kids get on me about that. I think I've always been a yes guy. I want to help people. I want to be a part of things. And so I'm trying to think at 60, the next decade of my life, what am I supposed to do that only I'm supposed to do? How did God wire me to, what can I contribute that matters the most? I've been saying this, we have a short life to make a big difference. Mm-hmm. And so the older you get, the shorter that life becomes. So you're trying to make the biggest difference with the shortest amount of time. So I have shorter time now than I had. And I want to live long but so I'm just trying to say, okay, Lord, what are the priorities of what am I going to stand before you? And I want to hear, well done, thou faithful servant. So what is that area that I need to be giving attention to serve? So I've thought a lot about that since I've turned 60. And of course, that is God, my relationship with him. That's my wife. She's been so faithful, and it's the best thing on the planet. My kids, grandkids, dear friends. I want to be a good friend. I don't want to grow older and be a worse friend. I don't want to grow older and be meaner. I've never understood the person who gets older and gets meaner. I want to grow older and be more generous, more giving, more kind, more considerate, noticing the needs of others. So there's all these things that are in my heart right now and in my mind that I'm trying to deal with, and I'm trying to, be better at in my life to be, not be a know-it-all. I mean, I'll speak in a couple weeks to our college. I'm doing the Youth Pastors Summit. I teach motion in 3 weeks, a bunch of students, junior high and high school. I say yes to every student thing that I get invited to, that if I could do it. I love preaching to young people and college students in any environment, because I think it keeps stretching me. I mean, when you're the old guy in the room at a youth conference, and it's like, what's your thing? I'm 60. That's my thing. I'm old as dirt and say what I want. And so, continuing to be stretched. I want to be mature. Good. I want to be a better communicator. I don't think, I don't want to preach I don't want my past sermons to be my best sermons.
Come on.
I want my next sermon, the next one. I heard a guy tell me this the other day. His name is Dwight Sandlin. He's a businessman in Birmingham. He's a dear friend. He's 70-something. He's built 11,000 houses. Him and his wife, Sandy, they're dear friends. I told him, I said, what house have you, what house are you most excited about? And I'll never forget what he said to me about 6 months ago. He said, the next one. Because it's the combination of all the ones I've built. So the next one I build will be the best one. And I sat there and thought, I want to live that way.
Preach.
What sermon am I most excited about? The one that I'm speaking in the morning. What church am I most excited about to plant? The next one. What outreach am I most excited about? What missions trip? What prison that I get to go preach at? I think that's so good. I think you live your life that way, and I think it helps you be a little more humble and innocent. You're not thinking that much about, you're just excited about the next one. Yep. The next person you meet, the next person you pray for, the next time you preach and come off the stage and there's somebody who walks up and says, this is my first time here. That's the best ever. So, you kind of think that way. And so that's been kind of what's resonating
So good.
to mature me is what am I most excited about? The next thing, the next opportunity.
Without a vision, people will perish.
Mm-hmm.
The next one. Ladies and gentlemen, Dino Rizzo, we're so grateful for you. Thank you for taking some time, a lot of time actually, hour and 37 minutes in, but I'll go with you all night, man. I think we're going somewhere after this hanging out, but we appreciate you guys. And I believe that this has been a blessing to you. If you're still here with us on the Mature Me podcast, go ahead, leave us a comment, any type of questions, the areas of feedback. We'd love to hear it from you, but share it, like it, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time right here on Mature Me.